One of the biggest discoveries of the 20th century, the discovery of Hetepheres' tomb, was an accident. The excavation of the Giza Plateau and Khufu's Great Pyramid was led by George Reisner, head of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts expedition, but he was on vacation when this unexpected discovery occurred. A photographer who was documenting the excavation, Mohammadine Ibrahim, was prepared to take photos of the east side of Khufu's Great Pyramid at Giza when one of the legs of his tripod hit some plaster on the ground. A closer look revealed that the plaster hit a subterranean stairwell. Ibrahim alerted the crew, who notified Reisner. Reisner flew back to Egypt immediately, and the excavation began. The stairwell led to a vertical shaft about 27.5 meters deep and was filled with limestone to keep out grave robbers. This shaft took 10 years to excavate. They discovered the seal of Khufu's mortuary workshop and some animal offerings on their way down. But the exciting part was the discovery of the burial chamber itself, located at the bottom. It was unfinished and contained great splendor. In George Reisner's words, some of the contents of the tomb were, quote, a beautiful alabaster sarcophagus with its lid in place. Partly on the sarcophagus and partly fallen behind it lay about 20 gold-cased poles and beams of a large canopy. On the western edge of the sarcophagus were spread several sheets of gold inlaid with feathers, and on the floor there was a confused mass of gold-cased furniture, end quote. The actual excavation of the burial chamber was actually quite dangerous. Dallas Dunham was the man to actually do the excavating, and he was almost killed when some rock fell from the ceiling and hit him on the head. Thankfully, he was wearing a helmet. It was also difficult because the chamber itself was a very small space, and the objects they were excavating were extremely delicate. Some objects were made of gilded wood, such as a bed, 2 armchairs, a carrying chair, a portable pavilion, several boxes for various uses, and copper tools. Jewelry was also in abundance in the chamber, including 20 silver bracelets inlaid with turquoise, carnelian, and lapis lazuli. Many of the objects were inscribed with Snefru and Hetepheres' names and titles, and could be dated to the 4th dynasty, so George Reisner came to the conclusion that it was the tomb of Hetepheres. This tomb was labeled G7000x. The most important object by far, however, was the sarcophagus, and the opening of the sarcophagus was highly anticipated and occurred in the later stages of the excavation. On March 3, 1927, a handful of the most important figures on the excavation gathered in the burial chamber to finally lift the lid of the sarcophagus and reveal the mummy of the great Queen Hetepheres. When the lid was lifted, there was nothing inside. The sarcophagus was empty. Although her body was gone, the remains of her body, immersed in a solution of natron and water, were found in a canopic box inside the burial chamber nearby. Where could her mummified body be? This remains a puzzling question in Egyptology today. Hetepheres is an important figure in ancient Egypt history, and finding her mummy would be a great discovery. Hetepheres I was one of the great queens of ancient Egypt. She was wife of the pharaoh Sneferu, the founding ruler of the 4th dynasty, and mother to Khufu, Sneferu's successor. She had many titles, including Mother of the King of the Two Lands, King's Mother, Attendant of Horus, and Daughter to the God. The marriage of Hetepheres and Sneferu marked the joining of 2 very influential lineages and ensured Sneferu's rise to power. She is a very powerful figure in Egyptian history because of the achievements of her husband Sneferu and her son Khufu. Her husband, Sneferu, is famous for the building of 3 great pyramids. Those pyramids are the Meidum Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, and the Red Pyramid. The Meidum Pyramid was groundbreaking because it marked a transition from the stepped pyramid structure to the more true pyramid form. It was first designed as a 7-step structure, but later modifications added layers to create a smooth, angled finish characteristic of true pyramids. The Bent Pyramid was the first true pyramid constructed by Sneferu. This pyramid has steeper angles, which warranted a whole new method of building where the layers are laid horizontally, marking the abandonment of the step pyramid method completely. Next is the Red Pyramid. One would expect the Red Pyramid to be a continuation of Sneferu's advancements in architecture during his reign, but the Red Pyramid's construction is actually simpler than its predecessors. Although Sneferu's remains have not been found, so many archaeologists think that the Red Pyramid may hold many secrets and hidden tunnels. Sneferu's accomplishments were great, especially in the realm of architecture, and sequential pharaohs were hard-pressed to top his achievements. The only pharaoh who rivals the architectural advancements made by Sneferu is the son of Hetepheres, named Khufu. Khufu built a pyramid necropolis that he called the Horizon of Khufu. He built on an elevated part of the Giza Plateau, so his pyramid could be seen from all around. Today, Khufu's Great Pyramid is the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and has survived history better than the other 2 pyramids in the Giza Pyramid complex that were built later. Sneferu's and Khufu's legacies are largely remembered today because of these pyramids, as is Hetepheres. Hetepheres is so important because she was the wife and mother to these great pharaohs, who both made incredible pyramids. These pyramids functioned as tombs for themselves and their loved ones. However, Hetepheres' tomb is a topic of great controversy and has been dubbed a great historical mystery. Where is her body today? There have been several theories about this, based on different interpretations of the evidence. The first theory comes from George Reisner himself, who was on site for most of the tomb's excavation and present at the time of the unveiling. He believes that Hetepheres died during Khufu's reign, and Khufu himself buried her, since the seal of his mortuary service was in the chamber. Reisner believes, however, that Khufu originally buried her at Dashur near her husband's Sneferu's pyramid, and that grave was robbed, and the mummified body was taken later. When Khufu realized that the body had been stolen, he relocated the rest of her burial goods secretly to Giza, and quickly built the tomb G7000x to put them in. Reisner justifies this with the broken and scattered pottery in the chamber, the fact that pieces of the sarcophagus chipped off, in addition to the fact that this tomb does not have a superstructure or a body. The tomb seems sort of hastily done. The sarcophagus was also scratched on one side, which Reisner claims could not have happened in the G7000x tomb. He also claims that the funerary goods were in reverse order of their original positions at Dashur. Reisner speculates that Khufu himself might not even have been told about the missing body, because he must have ordered the offering that was found in the niche in the wall, even though there was no body to give an offering to. Reisner's theory has many flaws. Why would grave robbers take the mummy and ignore the beautiful jewelry also in the tomb? Assuming they did just take the mummy, it is very odd that the lid of the sarcophagus remained intact, as the robbers probably would have just shoved it off the top, causing it to shatter on the ground. And if Hetepheres were to be reburied, why would she not just be reburied at Dashur instead of moving her and her things all the way to Giza? In addition, many Egyptologists doubt that Khufu would be okay with his mother being buried alongside shattered pottery. Mark Lehner, one such Egyptologist, has refuted every point of Reisner's speculations and supplied his own theory. According to Lehner, Hetepheres must have died early on during Khufu's reign, as pharaoh, and then was buried in the hastily dug G7000x shaft-like tomb, since the necropolis had not yet been finished. G7000x is similar to the tombs of the 3rd dynasty, and a superstructure was probably even started for this tomb, but was probably cancelled as Khufu's plans for his pyramid developed. Lehner therefore believes that once Khufu's plans were complete, the body of Hetepheres was moved into a more suitable tomb in one of the 3 small pyramids that he built, with brand new funerary equipment. Lehner proposes explanations for various elements of G7000x that support his idea instead of Reisner's. For example, he says that the copper tools found next to the sarcophagus were probably left by the workers who extracted the mummy in order to move it to its final resting place, as ordered by Khufu. Another Egyptologist, Dr. Zahi Hawass, believes that the body was originally buried in one of the smaller pyramids because a lot of the funerary equipment found in G7000x fit the dimensions of the tombs in Khufu's smaller pyramids. Hawass believes that the body and her funerary equipment was moved because there were many instances of grave robbing during the First Intermediate period, and the leadership wanted to protect the belongings of this great queen. The G7000x tomb, since it so resembles those tombs of the 3rd dynasty, might have actually been started in that time, and rediscovered by the priests who needed a place to relocate Queen Hetepheres and her funerary goods. This would also explain the apparent reversal of funerary objects observed by Reisner. This theory still does not explain, however, why the body is missing. I.E.S. Edwards, another Egyptologist and pyramid expert, speculates that G7000x was indeed meant to be the final resting place of Queen Hetepheres, and that robbers stole the mummy shortly after her burial. This would explain why the box full of her remains was not moved along with the mummy. However, it still fails to explain why the lid of the sarcophagus was not haphazardly broken on the floor, or why robbers would leave the priceless jewelry behind. The discovery of Heteferi's tomb, although one of the biggest discoveries of the 20th century, still leaves us scratching our heads. Although George Reisner was there, present for the discovery, and saw all of the evidence firsthand, his argument for the reason why Heteferi's body is missing is unconvincing because of the fact that the robbers presumably didn't take any jewelry. This same flaw applies to the argument of I.E.S. Edwards that her body was stolen immediately following the burial. While Zahi Hawass attempts to clear up the problem by saying that the body was moved by later generations to prevent grave robbing, he still does not address the crux of the problem, which is, where did the body go? Mark Lehner is the only one who comes close to explaining this phenomenon with his theory that Heteferi's died early on and then her body was later moved into one of Khufu's smaller satellite pyramids once they were complete. The truth of Heteferi's mummy may never be uncovered, but her legacy and the legacy of her family will live on through the pyramids and as long as Egyptologists keep digging.